Okay, I am going to, is it on? Yeah, I'm going to call the November 12th, 2024 regular council meeting to order and begin with a land acknowledgement that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta District 11. We recognize that we stand upon the land that carries the footsteps of many Indigenous people, including the Nihilwak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis. And the City honors the First Peoples of this land and is committed to fostering reconciliation through relationship, building, knowledge gathering, and education. And just before we begin with the agenda, I am going to ask for a moment of silence. We lost Helmuth Ritter yesterday. He passed away yesterday. He was a member of our firefighting crew for 66 years, so he's the second longest serving firefighter in Fort Saskatchewan. He also worked in public works for a number of years, and he worked for Heartland Housing doing maintenance after he retired from the city public works. So with that, let's just take a moment of silence in his memory. All right, thank you. So with that, first item that we have is consent agenda, and on the bottom of the agenda report it has an asterisk of items potentially to be approved by the consent agenda, which include 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4, which are all minutes, and 5.2, which is cancellation of the November 19th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. So if I could have a motion. Councillor Macon.
I'll make the motion that we approve the items on the consent agenda.
All right, thank you very much. Does anybody wish to have any of them severed? If not, I will close the motion. Please cast your vote. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. This is the opportunity now for delegations. Anybody who wishes to speak to any of the items that are on the agenda. We did have one individual who is registered, but he is not here. So we will continue on with the agenda. There's nobody online either? Okay, just double checking. So if he shows up, you can just let him know that he's missed his opportunity. And we will continue on with the new business, which is 5.1, new property tax penalty waiver. Trish Norman presenting.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Trish Norman, Revenue Services Coordinator with the City of Fort Saskatchewan. I'm here this afternoon.
Just move the mic a little closer.
I'm here this afternoon requesting Council's decision regarding an application for a waiver of property tax late payment penalty. On September the 12th, 2024, the City of Fort Saskatchewan received an application along with supporting document from the property owners requesting a waiver for property tax late payment penalties in accordance with property tax penalty waiver policy and procedure FIN 029C. As of September the 12th, 2024, the property owners have paid the full balance of outstanding property tax arrears, including late payment penalties. The property owners have consequently made an application for Council to consider late payment penalty reimbursement for other reasons as outlined in the supporting document. Administration is not authorized to waive these penalties since the authority is prescribed to Council as per the Municipal Government Act. The city relies on property taxes for funding of city operations and requires that taxes be received on a timely basis. Late payment penalties are used to discourage compliance with, are used to encourage compliance with payment deadlines and to mitigate the operational cost of processing late penalties. The city provides notice and time for property owners to pay their property taxes, and there are several payment options available, including post-dated checks, online payments, and the Ford electronic payment plan. Pursuant to Section 4.2 of the Property Tax Penalty Waiver Policy, Council may consider tax penalty waivers when there is an error in fact, when penalties are associated to a property which is exempt from property taxes, when there are compassionate grounds, or in accordance with other matters that Council deems acceptable. Administration recommends that the request to waive the late payment penalties be denied, since the application does not align with the criteria in the policy. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Nguyen?
Yeah, just a question regarding one of the statements made in the letter by the applicant saying that they experienced a change in the tax structure due to the subdivision of property, and then they were not immediately aware of the changes and understood their tax obligations. So it was subdivided. What was the change in tax structure aside from, I guess I'm just asking for some color, some clarity. Does this indicate that they were given two bills instead of one? And then what complications could have arisen to justify the applicant?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, there was not a change to the tax structure. There was a change to the assessment of the property because it was moved from residential to commercial, which changed the assessment of the property.
Okay, so there was no further paperwork or delays in communication with the city.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blizzard?
And going off that, did they request the change or was it just surprise to them?
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, their indication to the city was that they intended to subdivide the property and to put commercial.
So that was part of their plan.
That's correct.
Okay, and I'm willing to make a motion if you want.
Okay, do you have a question? Go ahead, Councillor Kelly. I'll come back to you.
Just to help me with my mind with the last two questions, the change in rezoning would have happened because the property owner or prospective property owner applied to have the zoning changed. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, that is correct. They did give the intent. Whether they have actually moved forward with registering anything at Alberta Land Titles, we have not yet seen.
Nonetheless, it was their actions. They requested the change. We complied.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Blizzard for the motion. Go ahead.
I make a motion that council approve the waiver of late penalty payments for tax roll 4517000 in the amount of $8,394.75.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
I do. I am going to speak against that because I believe that they should have been prepared for this, and knowing that it was going to become commercial, they should have known that their taxes were going to go up.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything on discussion and debate? Anything on close?
No.
Okay, motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. And the motion is unanimously defeated. Thank you very much. 5.2 was done under consent, so we will move to 6.1 Southport Meadows High Density Mixed Use District, first reading.
Good
Welcome.
afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Terrence Samra. I'm a planner here with the city. I'm here to present a brief summary of bylaw C14-24 to amend the land use bylaw to include a new special district in South Fort Meadows. In the council package, a technical report was included to provide detailed analysis of the amendments and justification. To begin, in June of 2024, Alterra, on behalf of South Fort Development Corporation, approached administration regarding their next development stage in South Fort Meadows, which can be seen as yellow on the image on the screen. They are proposing mixed-use development that will serve residents of different household sizes, lifestyles, and incomes, while supporting walkable neighborhoods and housing affordability. To accommodate the mixed-use development, the developer has proposed a new special district called SFM-MUD, South Fort Meadows Mixed Use District. This district would only be used in South Fort Meadows. This redistricting is for the portion of the larger site that is designated as high-density mixed-use development. Earlier this year, Council approved a redistricting for the RMH site to the north of the subject area. The subject site is east of Greenfield Link, west of 92nd Street, south of the recently rezoned RMH site, and north of the future South Ridge Boulevard extension. The development connects directly to South Greenfield Link and South Ridge Boulevard. The subject site is in the vicinity of Leslie McMillan Park, an outdoor rink, stormwater management facility, and the future commercial and church site. The adjacent roads accommodate multi-use trail network that connects the site to the adjacent community services. This application seeks to redistrict approximately 3 hectares of land, as seen in the crossed area in the yellow square, from UR Urban Reserve to SFM-MUD, South Fort Meadows Mixed Use District. Next, I want to speak a little bit about the details of the district. First is the street-oriented development. Greenfield Link has been designed to create a continuous active street front, as seen as the areas in pink on the image. The district creates a street-oriented development along Greenfield Link through the incorporation of street-oriented building design and placement. Next is the density credit. A credit is given towards the overall density of the site when commercial development occurs on the ground floor of a mixed-use building. This will incentivize mixed-use development, vertical development, and efficient utilization of developable land. Last is the diversity of housing options. This district supports semi-detached townhouses and apartments. Providing a mix of housing ensures the community accommodates of various lifestyles and income levels. A range of housing types helps create a more inclusive, resilient neighborhood, attracting a broad demographic mix and promoting long-term community stability. Next, just to speak a little bit about conformance to the city's planning documents, the Municipal Development Plan designates the South Fort Meadows area as part of Developing Neighborhood, which designs neighborhoods that are walkable and incorporate a diversity of housing options for the city's diverse population. The subject area also falls within a designated node from the Municipal Development Plan, which is intended as a vibrant, street-oriented community hub. These areas are designed with a mix of housing, shops, and commercial spaces to create a desirable place to live and gather. The South Fort Area Structure Plan designates this area as high-density, street-oriented mixed use. The intent for this area is to provide a variety of housing for different age and income groups. Housing options could include street-oriented townhouses, stacked townhouses, and apartments. From the South Ridge Meadows Outline Plan, the subject site is designated as high-density residential with possible mixed use and street-oriented design along Greenfield Link. The intent of the entire site is to create a neighborhood hub that would integrate and serve the needs of the surrounding community. So administration supports the redistricting application due to the compliance with the MDP, the South Fort Area Structure Plan, and the South Fort Ridge Meadows Outline Plan, as mentioned in the previous slide. Should Council give first reading to the bylaw, a public hearing will be advertised in the Fort Saskatchewan Record. Landowners within 100 meters of the proposed redistricting will be mailed a notice. A copy of the proposed bylaw will be available on the city's website, and the target date for the public hearing is December 10th, 2024. And at this time, I'd like to answer any questions that Council may have for administration.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take the first question. So with the mixed use, and I know it feels like every application that's coming forward now has got a commercial component to it. do you believe or not believe that we're kind of oversaturated in these commercial nodes in these areas?
Your worship, I don't think there's an oversaturation. I think what makes the commute or makes the neighborhood node like a community hub is having that mix, right? Having that mix of commercial, having that those shops, even the residential portion to it, and like local gathering spaces like say a plaza. Having all that together is what makes that place a node, makes where people want to come, right? Just and through our MDP when deciding where nodes are, like administration did look at it took a strategic look at where these places would be, where people would gather, and what would be the reason why people want to go there, right? And in this case, for this location, why it's within the node is you do have this mixed use component in South Fort, but you also have like the school that's nearby, just further down South Ridge Boulevard at the end of South Fort Drive. There's the high school there. So it's all these things coming together is what makes it a node and why people would want to gather. So I wouldn't say that oversaturation would be an issue at this case.
Okay, and I guess my second question when it comes to this is, because if you go further down the road, because this is the one you come down South Fort Boulevard, there's a just on the corner of South Fort Boulevard and across from Heartland Ford, there's a commercial node there, and it still isn't even built out. So I guess I am just questioning on these applications, is it really necessary to have quite as much commercial? Because I hear you talking about gathering, but if we don't get one commercial node built out, then why would we put in more?
Your worship, I'll attempt to answer that. I think the difference is, and the way we set it up through the municipal development plan, is that these neighborhood nodes are really meant to be that. They're really meant to kind of serve the neighborhood itself, as opposed to, say, the region or the city as a whole. There are commercial clusters that are located along the highway, which are more intended to kind of capture that highway traffic and that regional traffic. The idea with a neighborhood node is it's smaller in scale and it allows opportunities for people to walk there. Part of that as well is you want to kind of create a little bit more density within that node to support the commercial. So it's not like we would have kind of this large scale vehicle orientated commercial cluster. It might consist of a few shops and services that again would be to cater to the neighborhood itself.
Okay, I might come back on round two. Councillor Blizzard.
I guess my question here is, what's the benefit of this? Do we not have a district that would cover this? If we don't, because it seems we've had a couple of other different special requests here and there, do we need a new district that encompasses what they're requesting?
Your worship, councillors, that's correct. Yeah, the thing is, in the current land use bill, you can find opportunities of trying to do mixed use in other districts. It's just that this district that's before you is more of a hybrid of all of them. So there wasn't really a one size fit, like a district that would work for here. So that's why the developer came forward to approach administration to creating a special district in this case, because there just wasn't one that would work at the time.
Is this something, though, as we look for densification, more mixed use, something similar to this that we're going to need in the future? Like maybe we need to have a district like this?
Through you, your worship, Councillor Blizzard, I think the way to approach that question is what we're finding with the existing land use bylaw is it doesn't really align very well with our municipal development plan. And what we're seeing and what we've seen certainly over the last 2 or 3 years is we've seen more applications for direct control and special districts simply because the current land use bylaw and the structure of the land use bylaw is too rigid, and it doesn't allow for that flexibility and creativity within the districts itself. So what we're seeing here, because it's a mixed use district, is we don't have a conventional district that really allows for a mixed use building to happen. So that's why we're seeing more and more of these types of districts, and what our role is to make sure that it aligns with our municipal development plan.
So do we need a new land use bylaw or a
We're
once over? Yeah.
absolutely, and we've been in the process of
Okay.
making those changes.
Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
So what you expressed to us was a type of development where there would be commercial on the main floor and residential above a number of stories. What would you guess would be a typical build out for viability purposes? 3 stories?
Yeah, through your worship, councillors, I three to four, I believe is what would be intended.
So it would take a commercial developer to say, I want to build a building with residential and with some as yet to be developed commercial on the main floor. Convenience stores, realty offices, whatever could fall into that category, correct?
Through your worship, councillor, that's correct. The exact uses are obviously in the district, but yeah, it could be a mix. It could be personal service. It could be health service. It could be a variety of.
So ultimately, this zoning would allow the developer to do that, but it doesn't require anything to happen on the main floor. It could sit empty forever, because it comes down to, is it a viable opportunity for a developer to come in and make a major investment to ultimately create some potential commercial space? So that may not be viable, and it really depends on what the development community sees as their opportunity for investment there, correct?
Through your councillor, that's correct. It would come down to that, but there also, if the developer chooses not to do commercial, like they do have the choice of apartment, right? So you can there are different options in the district to that you could do, like for example a single standalone commercial, or you could do it a mixed use of like with residential above. So there are different options for a developer to do. They don't have to do strictly commercial and then residential.
Now we're getting to the point I'm interested in. So what you're saying is the developer can just have one level of residential with no commercial, even though it's a node. Isn't that what you just said?
So, sorry, say again.
So I thought you just said that he could have just one level. Would that be one level of commercial or one level of residential?
Well, it depends on the type of building. Through your worship, councillor, it depends on the type of building you're doing. The developer could choose to do apartment buildings, which would just be all residential and including the main floor, or they can choose to do mix, right? So then you'd have commercial on the main floor and residential above, or they can choose just to do commercial. So there are different options for the developer to choose here.
So it comes down to whether somebody sees that as a viable development option.
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe if I could just add to it as well, the node, I guess, there's the area that's across the street, which is zoned as DCA 22. Council might remember that there was a church that was approved, as well as a commercial area as well. So on this site, which is before council today, in order to meet the density, we're probably looking at around 300 plus units of residential. So with that type of density, achieving about 75 units per net residential hectare, and in our conversations with the developer, it does make that site somewhat attractive for commercial.
So you're convinced this is a positive change for the city?
Through your worship, Councillor Harris, it would align with the MDP's policies specific for node type development, yes.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I just learned something then from the last discussion. So if this rezoning goes ahead, the property owner will have a choice. They can put commercial on the main floor or not put commercial on the main floor. Is that correct?
Through your worship, councillor, that's correct.
Okay. Which begs the question, why do we need the zoning then?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, the zoning does allow for a mix of commercial. and there is also a bit of an incentive that's built in that would incentivize commercial within a mixed-use building. So it does allow it. Without this type of a district, then the developer would have to carve the site up to provide that commercial as a separate conventional use.
Okay, thank you. That helped. One last question, much simpler, I think. The density credit of 2 units for every 100 square meters of commercial, that only applies then if it's a commercial on the main floor of a multi-story building? Number one question. Number two, I guess this is part of the EMRB growth package rules. It's their credit, not our credit. Who gives the credit?
Through your worship, Councillor Kelly. So your first question, yes, that credit would only apply to a mixed-use building. In terms of your second question, that density target applies to the whole neighborhood. So you could look at this site, again, a couple of different ways. If there was, because it is identified as a node and they were to carve out, say, a commercial piece, then the remainder of that parcel, we would have to look at probably achieving about 75 to 90 units per net residential hectare. It will be achieved through the through the development of this site, regardless of the density credit.
So I'm going to paraphrase that. It's the city of Fort Saskatchewan allocating the credit, and we have to make it up on a different parcel to make our overall density.
Through your worship, it will be achieved regardless. We're only applying the density because it incentivizes a mixed-use building and makes more efficient development of the site.
But I think what I said is still accurate. I didn't question our ability to meet the target. I just questioned where the credit was coming from, and it's an internal balancing of the books that you're doing.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, just once again, further to last couple comments that have been made, and you mentioned that the place of worship site with commercial next door has been approved by council, and so I'm just looking for kind of the thought pattern in approving this kind of development and to allow commercial as part of this redistricting, given that the vacancy rates of commercial in Fort Saskatchewan has its ebbs and flows, and this is going to be now an adjacent commercial site. So I guess what are the thought patterns behind adding another commercial site in this area so that we're protected from seeing large vacancy at a single node?
Through your worship, Councillor Nguyen, again, like we refer to the municipal development plan for direction. And when we look at the development of a node, we're looking at things like, what type of density, what type of intensification is going to go into that node, how is it going to be developed, is it going to be something that could be accessed by residents within the neighborhood, not just by car, but able to walk, bike, and that sort of thing. So it is, I think, appropriate density, given that it is it really caters to the neighborhood as opposed to the large area itself.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll take that assurance from you.
Okay, thank you. So in round two, so I've got to ask the question, did the developer ask for the commercial to be part of that, or was that a request of administration?
Through your worship, the developer had proposed the mix, so they would have proposed commercial and residential when they first submitted their application. So commercial was already included.
Okay, I'll leave it with that. Okay, what is the wish of council on first reading? Councillor Kelly?
Mayor Katcher, I'm prepared to make the motion. Just let me actually get to it, please. And now it's not loading. I move that council give first reading to bylaws C14-24 to amend land use bylaws C2320, and further that a public hearing be scheduled.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there is an A and a B.
There's
that
an A and a
just-
B.
Yeah. It's on the screen now.
I got it now. So this is different than what I read. I'm going to start over, Mayor Katcha, right from the beginning.
Okay.
I move the council give first reading to bylaw C14-24 to amend land use bylaw C2320 to A, add special district SFM MUD South Fort Meadows mixed use district, and B, redistricting a portion of southeast quarter 195422 W4 M from UR Urban Reserve to SFM MUD, which is South Fort Meadows mixed use district, and further that a public hearing be scheduled for December 10, 24.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. I hope that the main floor commercial actually proves to develop and show up and evolve. I think the location of this particular project is sound. There's nothing I don't like about it, actually. I think I get the concerns over the economic merits of the development, but that's not for me to decide. It's not my capital going into it. It's for those that are doing the construction or doing the development to figure out. Overall, though, I like the project and I wholeheartedly support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's open for discussion and debate. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. I'm going to support first reading. A couple weeks ago, a few of us had the opportunity to go on the regional reinvention field trip. And as part of that, we were able to take a look at this developed area. And the developer spoke a lot about the diverse development and the success in that area. And it was very exciting. And the developer talked about being very excited to bring this next section to council. So I look forward to hearing from the developer at the public hearing to hear more about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll support the first reading as well. The only reason I asked the question, did the developer ask for it versus administration? In speaking with a different developer on a different site who wanted to build an apartment, he was told, well, you'll get it through if you put commercial on the main floor. And it was like, there's so much commercial already, so that's why I was asking who's pushing it, and I won't say the location or anything. So I understand the neighborhood nodes, but I also understand there's so many nodes now in these different areas, and a lot of them aren't even being able to get filled up, and I think that actually is worse for our community. So. But I will support first reading. Okay, Councillor Kelly, anything on close?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay, thank you for first reading as presented. Please cast your vote. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, the next item we have is responsible pet ownership bylaw for 3 readings.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Corrine Rayner, and I'm the Director of Protective Services for the City. With me, I have Sergeant Ben Sharp, the Municipal Enforcement Supervisor. We are here to present the new Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw C11-24 and request 3 readings of the bylaw. The Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw's purpose is for the regulation and control of domesticated animals in the city. We have had the opportunity to present Council with the proposed changes of this bylaw and have taken some feedback and incorporated into the bylaw, which I will highlight. Administration was also asked to prepare 2 reports for information, which we presented to Council on September the 17th. The first report was on the merits of animal licensing and the city resources required for the administration and enforcement of the animal licensing requirement. The recommendation from the report and what is being presented today within the responsible pet ownership bylaw is the elimination of the licensing requirement and replacing it with an identification tag. We also provided council with information on ways of managing cats within the community. The recommendation from that report was also to maintain our status quo. However, we do have some improvements and enhancements, which I'll highlight at the end of our next steps forward in the management of cats as well. Some of those enhancements are being dealt with through the budget process, and I'll speak to that at the end of the presentation. Council had provided feedback and clarifying questions regarding bees, snakes, and the nighttime hours of noise for barking within the bylaw. We also heard from council that fines needed to be increased and to give bylaw the teeth that it needs in order to gain compliance with the application of the bylaw. I'll provide a review of the proposed changes to the bylaw, starting with some of the definitions. There were 7 new definitions added to the bylaw, and the language was cleaned up to better assist with the enforcement of the requirements. There is a recommendation of eliminating animal licensing within this bylaw. This recommendation is based on the limited benefits compared to the resources needed for the administration and the enforcement of that requirement of the bylaw. The city continues to see low compliance rates and increasing negative feedback from the community regarding the value of having a pet license. This change will allow staff to focus on higher priority tasks and enforce more serious violations of the responsible pet ownership bylaw. So Section 3, the licensing requirement, has been replaced with an identification tag. The owner of a dog, nuisance dog, restricted dog, or cat shall ensure a visible tag attached to a collar or harness containing the phone number of the owner is worn at all times by the dog or cat if it is off the property of the owner. An identification tag will assist their officers with the reunification of pets to their owners, and we've attached a $200 fine to not having an identification tag. This is increased from a $150 fine for not having an animal license, so we have increased that fine amount. Just to briefly review some of the other changes that we have made, Section 4 is for the regulation of dogs and cats, and what we've done in this section is expanded the different aggression levels, such as chase, threaten, harass, attack, injure, or kill an animal. And in Section 5 is a new section that we've added on having animals properly secured within the bed of a truck or the vehicle. Section 7 is regarding noise and excessive barking. We did change this section to match the nighttime hours of the Community Standards bylaw. And we have set time limits around the barking. So it's a 1 hour conditions, 1 hour of continuous barking during the day and 20 minutes during the nighttime hours of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. during the weekday and 10 p.m. to 9 a.m. on weekends. Section 9 has been revised to give peace officers the power to designate a dog restricted sooner than the previous bylaw. A dog is deemed restricted if it damages property, chases, attacks, threatens, or bites an animal or a person, or if that dog has been deemed a dangerous dog under the Dangerous Dog Act. The new bylaw also allows flexibility with the conditions placed on a restricted dog. Section 11 has been revised for seizure and impounding of animals. We have changed the number of hours municipal enforcement can hold an animal from 48 hours to 72 hours, which does align with the Animal Protection Act. Section 12.2 is new, and this is adding a device used to secure an animal shall be of an adequate length to allow for exercise and the proper health of that animal. We have brought in some of the wording and provisions from the Animal Protection Act into the bylaw in Section 12.3. The reason we've done this is it just allows for quicker and easier enforcement of these aspects, and it's for the basic care of an animal. So to ensure that an owner provides adequate water and food, shelter, proper vet care. And so it just allows us to help enforce aspects of that Animal Protection Act within our bylaw that is quicker sometimes than the court systems. Section 12.4 is also new, and this reads that no dog or cat shall upset any waste receptacle or scatter garbage around. A review was conducted of the fines and penalties, and there have been some increases to the fines. They will range from $150 to $1,000 depending on the severity of the infraction. Based on the feedback that we've received from council, we have done some increasing in the fines for failing to have an identification tag and also to have a cat or dog at large. We have increased that fine from $150 to $200. This concludes the overview of the changes made to the Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw, and administration is recommending that council give 3 readings of the bylaw. Some of the next steps will be to do some education in the community to help bring awareness to the new aspects of the the Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw, to also educate our pet owners of having their animals at large and the increased fines. We will be working with corporate communications to do that education, updating our websites, and preparing a flyer that will go out as well. A budget recommendation is coming forward to council to increase the Protective Services budget by $15,000. That will help us to maintain contracts with companies, with shelters and rescues for animals that we turn over to them. We do work with several different shelters to transfer animals, and this $15,000 will help us secure spots for animals from our community into those shelters. Another avenue we are proposing to council to help residents deal with cats roaming on their property or at large is that we currently rent cat traps out at $50 each. And through our fees and charges recommendation within the budget process, we are recommending that we give those cat traps for free as a free service to residents. We don't rent out any cat traps at $50 a trap. So helping residents to deal with cats that are roaming on their property, we feel that will be well received within the community. So Sergeant Sharp and I are happy to answer any questions that you have, and we are recommending taking this bylaw forward.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up for clarifying questions. Councillor Blizzard.
Just a few little things. Thanks for all the information. So with new rules, if they're approved, will you advertise before we start putting it in? And when do they take effect? Is it the end of this year or 1st of January?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Blizzard, the bylaw will take effect when it's approved, and then we will start that educational process through some social media posts, and our officers will have that education approach to it and educating people before fines would be issued. So we will have that approach to it.
Okay, and then if we're going ahead with this and we have new fines, will they be used a little bit more so that, you catch someone and they don't have a tag? And I mean, I get the first warning, but, at some point you just say, sorry, but you're going to have to pay.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Blizzard, it is our intention to enforce the aspects of the bylaw and to have a balanced approach of using education, but also to enforce it as that deterrent. So that's why we've raised some of those fines to be a better deterrent. We've also in the past really focused on gaining compliance with animal licensing, and therefore sometimes fines didn't go forward with getting compliance with that aspect of the bylaw. So we're going to really change and shift that focus to those serious aspects of the bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, and hi again. Just an initial comment. My considerable reading on this subject over the last several weeks, most modern writers don't use the word feral cats anymore. It's free roaming. I'll leave it at that. But I do, my first question, you're stating here that you recommend the status quo service level for managing, I'm going to say, free roaming cats in the community. Can you explain to council what the current service level is and what the service level was for the last 5 years, because I think it's changed. And I'm not sure we had much of a service level. So help us understand, please.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Kelly. So our current service level is that we do have aspects within the bylaw that can be enforced. And so we do prohibit cats from being at large within the community, and that is within the bylaw, and we can enforce that. The approach that has been taken is educating people, and it's really not been a deterrent now. That's what we've seen. So what we do is we get a report of a cat roaming at large, and if an individual has trapped that cat or caught the cat, they can bring it into the Protective Services building, and we will take that cat in and try to find its owner. Our officers will speak with owners, and we have issued fines for having cats at large. And so that is what we do. We will take in those cats, and if a no owner is found, then we do transfer them to a shelter when those shelters do have capacity. We have, when you're speaking about what our service level has been, it has been a challenge in accepting cats in, and there have been times where we have not been able to accept cats in from the community because the shelters have been at full capacity. So moving forward, the hope is to secure some contracts with shelters, and that's why we're increasing our funding to help us secure those spots so that we can always be accepting those cats in and then either finding the owner and enforcing that aspect of the bylaw or transferring that cat to a shelter.
If I may then, I'm going to follow up on that, but a little bit later. Under your proposed 9.2B, it references there, excuse me, I think for the dangerous dogs or dangerous animals, it has to be under the care of, there we are, 9.2B, 3 little I's. When off the property, the owner of a restricted dog must be under the effective control of the owner or someone over the age of 18. Is it otherwise required that the owner be at least 18?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, I don't believe there's anything in here stipulating that the owner would have to be 18 years of age.
And I'm pointing that out as an inconsistency. Somebody could argue, I don't think anybody would, but let's hypothetically look at some examples, and it could easily be possible that an 80-pound dog or a 100-pound dog is deemed to be the owner of, or believed to be the owner of a 10-year-old child. And I'm not sure that's what you're driving at here. So I think you could simplify it simply by saying it must be under the control of somebody who's 18 years old, period. And I'll leave it at that. So 9.2B. Mayor Katcher, come back to me, please. I'm done for now.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Oh, Councillor Abatoye.
Thank you for your presentation, Corinne. Just 2 quick questions. So the first time is going to be a warning they'll get because it's kind of a new program that we're doing. So the first time is a warning, and the second time is when they get the fine.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Abatoye, and possibly Officer Sharp can help me with this, but typically, depending on the severity of what it is that the officer is dealing with, it might be a warning or it might go straight to an enforcement tag off, depending on the severity of the infraction.
Okay, great. Thank you. My second question is, you had mentioned when you were doing your presentation that sometimes the shelters are at capacity and obviously there's no way you can put the animals. So how does securing the contracts with the shelter deal with that problem?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Abatoye. So what we've been working on is we are guaranteed so many spots within the shelter. And so we have a contract where we pay a fee, and then we have so many spots that we can take them and and work with that shelter. So we have 2 shelters now that we have secured some contracts with, and then they just relay those costs back to us. So that is helping us with securing spots within those shelters.
So it's just a follow-up question. So when the shelter is at capacity, it's not actually at capacity. It's just at capacity for walk-ins, something like that. Is that what that means?
Through your worship to Councillor Amatoye, when a shelter's at capacity, it's for the most part at capacity for all, not just our reserved spots.
Right. So that's why I asked the question I asked. How does securing a contract with the shelter help deal with that?
There
problem?
can be stipulations within that contract that the animal has to be accepted by them regardless of their capacity.
Okay. Now that makes
So,
sense. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Round 2, Councillor Blissard.
How, and we still have our peace officers not working overnight, right? By law enforcement.
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, correct. We currently operate till 8 p.m.
So how do we enforce rules overnight? Like, you know, a neighbor's barking, that dog is just incessantly. Do you rely on me for it's been over an hour? Like, how do you patrol that? How do you enforce it?
There'd be a couple different ways. Our local RCMP has full authority to enforce these bylaws as well. And we do rely quite heavily in those evening hours on if a reporting party can capture video, witness statements, things along those lines that allow us to take enforcement action.
Okay. And then I guess the same thing in daytime. So do you rely on, if somebody complains that dog's been barking forever can seem like forever when it might only be 10 minutes. How do you patrol that? Do you get, again, other neighbors?
We typically do an initial patrol ourselves, but we always ask the reporting party to complete a barking dog log where they would keep track for a number of days, a week or two of dates, times, durations that help create a good footing for taking enforcement action.
Okay. And just one more thing. What's our current, and then maybe you had it somewhere and I missed it, but what's our current, I would say, income? What do we get from fines currently, and do we anticipate we may have more with the fines going up because, people are still going to break some of the rules?
Just give me 1 second here.
If you have it.
I do. So, Your Worship, through to Councillor Blizzard. So this is a slide regarding our revenue from fines as well as the licensing requirement. And so fines have been low recently. So with the increased fines, we will see, and the fact that we are no longer focused on getting compliance with an animal license, we will see the correlation with fine revenue increasing here. Okay. So fines have increased from the lowest of $100 up to $200, and so we have that range that we're focusing on, and there will be more enforcement and fine revenue with this new bylaw.
And hopefully that'll cover some of the cost to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Round 2, Councillor Kelly, questions?
Yes, thank you. 13.1D talks about adding outstanding penalties or fines amounts and expenses, I guess, to the property tax roll if the contravention of the bylaw occurred on all or part of the owner's property. What happens if the property is rented? It seems to me that it should still apply, but I'm not sure that this covers that.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Kelly, you are correct. And we have had a situation in that aspect of a renter under the Dangerous Dog Act. We had to put that animal down, and some of those costs ended up, we did put it to that owner of that property. So it does not cover, you're correct, it does not cover a renter, typically because of the fine that went to the renter.
I get it, but it's the owner that has the renter on the property. So is there some other restriction that prohibits the city from adding fines and costs due to a contract between a property owner and another individual, can that not still be added to the property tax roll, or is there some other legislation that prohibits that?
I am not sure if there is any other legislation. We'd have
Yeah,
to look into that.
I'll
Yeah.
flag that one as well. Okay, thank you. Moving to 7.1. I know we need to have something, and I don't know how you write it, but it would seem to me that animals, and particularly probably dogs, large dogs, can make a variety of noises over and above or in addition to barking. And yet the bylaw simply refers to bark, howl, or meow. Is there a reason why we just couldn't state noises caused by the animal and broaden this up a little bit?
Through your worship, to Councillor Kelly, the reasoning behind having barking, howling, and meowing excessively is to, as best as possible, identify what type of noise that animal is doing. To just put noise would be very open-ended, I think.
And that's the intent, because I'm imagining a dog left in a kennel in a duplex or something like that, and the dog's banging around on the floor, and I got to listen to it next door, or the dog is outside and he's banging on the gate because he wants out of the yard, or something to that effect. It's still a nuisance, still annoying. I just encourage you to think about that. I think we've overly limited or restricted the intent here.
Your worship, through to Councillor Kelly, I think too, it's what the court systems, what we have to prove in court. So in order to lay a charge with reasonable probable grounds, we have to be able to prove and be it very specific. So sometimes very objective things then do not get followed through in the courts, and that's why it gets quite specific there.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come back in. Thank you, Mayor Catcher.
Okay, Councillor Noyan, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. Just following along section 7 around the discussion. So a noise complaint is given for a dog that is barking and somebody thinks is barking too much. You mentioned that there's a requirement, or is there a requirement of any other witness besides the complainant? You mentioned you did surveillance or try to do surveillance in that instance yourself. But is there a requirement? Because I don't see the specificity under the wording in the bylaw that there is an actual requirement of anything other than one individual making the complaint to be able to then issue a violation tag.
Through your worship, to Councillor Noyan, the only requirement that we would need would be from one person with sufficient evidence and witness statement to support what their concern and complaint is.
Okay, so and that's basically what I'm getting to. So there's really only one individual. So there's nothing that protects an individual that's a dog owner from receiving a violation tag. There's nothing in here that protects them. So anybody can basically, any resident can issue a violation tag themselves as long as an officer deems it as that is excessive noise.
If there's sufficient evidence to support their claims, their complaint, then yes, and it would be on them, if that made it to trial, to be on the stand to confirm that information.
Okay, and then so why would you not, under your procedure, I guess, and this isn't specified under the bylaw, why would you not have it on your procedure to also require gathering a barking dog log from a dog owner? So that there's some sort of comparative, and that I think would substantiate evidence in court and make it less subjective, right?
And that is an option that our officers do have, is grabbing a log from a dog owner as well.
And
or an
how
animal
often does that happen where you have actually two pieces of witness?
I can't speak to exactly how many times that happens, but it is an option available to our officers during their investigation.
Because would it help to make that a requirement?
Your worship, through to Councillor Nolan, I think that requirement comes into the basis of it's the burden of the person who is so in this case the person that was issued the tag to then if you wanted to plead not guilty to that tag, then you would go through the process, and that is that opportunity for you to speak to that tag and provide your testimony as to the innocence or guilt of that tag at that time. So it's through the court system. It's the procedures of how any violation tag is given to anyone. They can dispute it. So the person receiving that tag has that opportunity to dispute that tag through the court system.
Correct. So, yeah, last comment on this. So if somebody wanted to defend the tag in court, you are also required to be in court, correct? To prove that you had enough evidence. So there's actually two parties, not just the complainant that would have to.
Your worship,
follow
through to
through.
yes, that's correct. So there would be in the court system, there would be the witness that has made the claim that the dog has been barking for excessive periods of time. There would be the officer that issued the tag, and then it would be on the onus of the person receiving the tag to prove that they were not guilty in that instance.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. I was just curious about, for the identification tags, it only indicates that a phone number is required. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to why that is the only requirement, because I would think that even just adding ownership name, like not the dog's name, owner's name, would still help us in the case of, say, a number not working.
Through your worship to Councillor Megan, the decision just to have a phone number was primarily for privacy reasons, so that someone's name, address, that type of stuff wasn't out in the open for someone to find and have. So having that phone number didn't really disclose any of that personal information, and the onus is on the owner to make sure that that phone number is up to date as well. So
thank you.
Thank you. Round 3, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Section 4.8, please. I'm not sure, number one, I understand it, and number two, I truly think that it exceeds the limits of the criminal code. It says section 4.8 may not apply in the sole discretion, but 4.8 is the section where that wording exists. So should that read section 4 something else?
through your worship to Councillor Kelly, that could be 4.8.1, I believe, potentially.
Okay. Then it goes on to say, may not apply in the sole discretion of a peace officer. If a restricted dog in this case kills a person, I struggle with that huge. What happens if a child throws a frisbee over a fence and a restricted dog kills the kid? The whole purpose of this. So is that your intent, to make this your discretion if a restricted dog actually kills somebody?
Your worship, through to Councillor Kelly, if it was a restricted dog that actually killed somebody, then we would be dealing with it under the Dangerous Dog Act. So if it was that severe of a violation, it would be falling under the Dangerous Dog Act and not our bylaw.
And I would agree with that.
Yeah. Which
gets us back to the wording of this.
So the intent with this is to make it so that if a dog, if a dog does chase or attack someone that has come onto their property, that was the intent with it, is that then under an officer's discretion, they would deal with it differently.
So you're comfortable with it saying, or kills a person?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, like Corrine had said, that the purpose of this was so that if someone was committing a criminal act of trespassing onto your property and your dog had attacked them, that you would, as a dog owner, not be liable for any fines against you, as there's a criminal act taking place on your property. If a dog did kill an individual, it would be under the criminal code and wouldn't fall under our, we wouldn't be pursuing it through our bylaw regardless.
And I'm not arguing that it would, other legislation would immediately jump into play. What we're talking about is the wording of this particular bylaw. And I do think that that needs to be cleaned up. Because I, as a councillor, am not at all comfortable passing a bylaw that says we anticipate that some dangerous animal in the community could kill a kid. And that would be okay in any stretch of the imagination. So I struggle with that. Mayor Katcher, I'll wave off. Come back to me.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abatoye.
Thank you. So just back to Councillor Kelly's points. So the reason you've put this here is just to make it clear that it wouldn't be us dealing with this. It will go to the appropriate authorities to deal with. Is that why it's written this way?
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, correct, yes, as well as to eliminate any, we did not see a need to fine an animal owner if it had chased, harassed, attacked someone who was trespassing with, say, criminal intent on their property.
Okay. And just a second question I had, in your presentation initially, you talked about handing out free cats, trying to say my writing, free cat traps. Is that coming at an additional cost to the city? And if yes, what is that cost?
Your worship, through to Councillor Abatoye, we currently do own all of the traps, so there are no additional costs to that. We are just removing the fee to rent them out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the next round. Councillor Kelly, questions?
Thank you. Section 4.5. And I think this is probably the biggest concern I have with the proposed bylaw. And it's the last 4 or 5 words. Surrender the animal to a peace officer, comma, and here's the issue, if directed to do so. So that gives the peace officer the option to say no or yes. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, that would give the peace officer the discretion whether the animal needed to be surrendered to them or not. And that can be for a variety of reasons. If they're on a priority call where they can't take the animal immediately, but there is a phone number on it that the finder is able to contact and get a hold of the owner and go about reuniting that way.
And I understand that. But that's not what this says. It says it gives the peace officer ultimate decision over whether or not to take custody of an animal that is presumably in one of the traps that the city provides. Is that the intent?
Your worship, through to Councillor Kelly, the intention of section 4.5 is that a peace officer, that a person who takes ownership or finds a cat or dog at large and has that in their yard, they need to contact us to let us know that they're in possession of that animal, and then the peace officer will give them further instruction to bring it into the Protective Services building or hold on to it. So that's what the intention is.
But that's not what it says. It says, if directed to do so.
by the peace officer.
Exactly. So the peace officer has, according to this wording, the option of not taking control of the animal. That is correct, right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
And in most cases, in all cases, we would be taking possession of that animal, is our practice.
What about the last 5 years? In all cases, did you take possession of the animal if in fact one would have been called in?
Your worship, through to Councillor Kelly, no, we have not in instances where we have nowhere to transfer that animal.
And
so that would be up to our discretion, is to our capacity within our service levels of what we could do.
But that's the point. So let's leave it at that. It gives the option. I'm going to debate it with fellow councillors when the time comes. Thank you.
Okay, that looks like all the questions. So the wish of council. Councillor Blizzard.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
1 second. I'll make a motion that council give first reading to responsible pet ownership bylaw C11-24.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion?
And in speaking to that, I think this is a good, solid document, and I think it will benefit all.
All right, thank you. I'll accept the motion. It's up for discussion and debate. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I think the reason we have a responsible pet bylaw in front of us is that the city understands that animals free roaming in the community are a community problem. And we need to enact bylaws to help control that problem. Nuisance animals are a community problem. And I do believe that 4.5, this is the most obvious and important change that this bylaw could have. That 4.5 needs to instruct the person that is in possession of a free roaming animal to, first of all, I agree, if reasonably possible in short order, return it to the owner. I think that's common sense. But above all else, notify community enforcement services, and enforcement services would take control of that animal. I say that because it's not reasonable to pass the burden or even give the city the option of passing that burden to an individual citizen. I understand completely, Corinne, that this isn't an easy chore. It's not easy for me either. But nonetheless, it needs to be dealt with. The status quo, administration's comment, status quo is a moving thing. We haven't defined what status quo is. And there's nothing in here that defines what it is the community or the city will do for free roaming animals. I would add that I believe, and I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that the city of Edmonton includes also in their bylaw restrictions and penalties for abandonment of animals, and I didn't touch that out on the question period. I think that's something that this bylaw seriously needs to consider. Certainly other small communities in Western Canada, and I can share information with council if they'd like to see it, has put restrictions against abandonment into the bylaw. I think it's clear that the criminal code states that abandoning an animal is subject to a fine up to $5,000. The Animal Protection Act of Alberta states that it is an offense to cause an animal to be under stress. And it defines stress as not caring for the animal, not providing food, shelter, protection from extremes of heat and cold. And returning an animal to the wild is subjecting that animal to stress. Contravenes the criminal code, contravenes the Animal Protection Act. And again, I get back to the city's responsibility. So I want to stress, I'm not talking about anything that is inhumane here. Absolutely not. None of council or administration is. But I am talking about having a process that allows us to live within the existing legislation of higher levels of government. And I could go on forever. I'm going to sign off, Mayor Katcher, and come back on and conclude my comments after others have had a chance to speak.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen on discussion and debate.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just be short here. First, just question for Legislative Services. If we wanted to make this motion and pass the bylaw approving solely the new pet licensing structure, if there are referral motions coming, which I also do have one, which is just a small suggested change, could we do that, or we might? I think I heard that we might be prepared to do that.
Mr. Kaiser.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen. In a word, no. Because the current animal control bylaw has the licensing requirement in it, and the proposed responsible pet ownership bylaw does not, there's no real way to remove the requirement for animal licensing without either passing an amending bylaw to amend the current bylaw solely respecting animal licensing, or passing the responsible pet ownership bylaw, subject to any amendments made today, or if a referral is made when the bylaw comes back.
Okay, so we'd have two separate bylaws essentially in the interim before this could come back to council.
So either an amending bylaw solely dedicated to animal licensing could be passed before year's end to address animal licensing, or the proposed responsible pet ownership bylaw.
Right, and then yes, that would require a notice of motion. Then should that be dealt with at the end of this meeting or now?
It could be done as, I suppose, a germane referral or direction to administration, rather, regarding this bylaw, because it addresses animal licensing.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Kelly has something to add to that.
Are you finished? Okay. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you. Mike, please.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Andrew, the licensing requirement is buried within the animal control bylaw, is that correct?
Excuse me. Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, yes, the licensing requirement stems from the current animal control bylaw.
So council could pass a motion to amend the current animal control bylaw to remove the licensing requirement.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, a bylaw can only be amended by a bylaw. So an amending bylaw would have to receive 3 readings.
Well, Mayor Katcher, I'm going to move regardless to refer this bylaw back to administration. So I move that this be referred back, this bylaw, appropriate number, be referred back to administration for further comment, given the discussion that's happened today.
So, Your Worship, if I could weigh in here, what I would recommend is make a motion or make a decision based on the referral motion. If council would like to remove the pet licensing requirement, you could pass a subsequent motion, assuming the referral passes, a subsequent motion directing administration to amend the existing animal control bylaw before the year end in order to move that pet licensing requirement. We are on a bit of a time crunch. Typically, notifications go out within the next week. We could delay those and bring the item before council either at the 26th or the 12th council meeting in order to make a decision before year end.
Okay, thank you. If I read council correctly, I don't think there's much opposition to removing the licensing requirement. However, that's my take on council. Mayor Catcher, may I speak to my
Okay, I haven't accepted your referral motion yet.
Okay, is there a reason for that?
Well, because I've got a question, parliamentary one, that goes to this one. So I guess the question that I have, so I know it's a referral motion, and I know you said that there was a tight timeline on it. What are the other alternatives, or the other? So I guess what are the other alternatives, Mr. Kaiser? Is it to pass the bylaw and then take a motion to then bring changes to this bylaw so that at least most of this bylaw could be put into effect?
To your worship, I think there's a few different options. One being that the bylaw as presented is passed, it gets its 3 readings, and then direction is given to administration to come back with amendments to that bylaw, the responsible pet ownership bylaw. Alternatively, this bylaw can be referred back and administration be directed to bring back an amending bylaw for the current animal control bylaw solely for the purposes of removing the animal licensing requirements. Those are the 2 primary options as I see it.
Okay, so Councillor Kelly, I'm going to ask the question, are the changes that you're requesting significant enough that they couldn't be just done through an amending motion? So under section 4.5, where you're suggesting a wording change as opposed to sending the entire bylaw back? And I only ask this because if you're referring it, they're going to have to know exactly which sections need to come back.
Mayor Catcher, I'm prepared to wordsmith this on the fly. I don't think administration is.
We're here to do that. So if there is, if there's a motion to amend a section, we can do that. Mr. Kaiser?
Yeah, to your worship, and I suppose through your worship to Councillor Kelly, we've noted some of the sections that you've brought up and have, I guess, concerns or proposed revisions for. I've got 5 here that are not section 5 different sections that you've noted. I think it would be best to take this bylaw away and not amend it on the fly, so to speak.
So I only ask that question because council hasn't had an opportunity as a whole to say, do they accept those amendments or not? So we're here to discuss this bylaw, and I would probably prefer to have an amending motion put on for a section. We discuss it. If council wants to approve it or make an amendment, then we vote on that amendment. Because otherwise there's no guarantee.
I honestly call point of order on that, Mayor Catcher.
I'm just trying to get this resolved. I mean, we can do the referral motion, but the referral motion is going to have to list out.
Administration through Janelle already gave a viable alternative to handle the problem. And I didn't hear any comments to the negative on that.
To your worship, administration's recommendation would be to not do the amendments at this meeting because of the quantity.
Okay, well, I'll take the referral motion then.
Okay, after that sojourn, may I now speak to it?
Yes, you may.
Perfect, thank you. I think I've pointed out several areas of the proposed bylaw that are significant issues, at least they are in my mind. Summarize a couple of them. I have severe wording with problems with the wording of 4.8, where it mentions or references killing a person. I honestly don't see why that needs to be there, and I think that wording could be cleaned up and several of those sections summarized into a few specific comments that catch the intent. I have questions around the discrepancy between an owner and a required caretaker or person in control to be 18. I think that's inconsistent, and I think the point that is made there is a responsible adult and or a responsible individual capable of maintaining control of the animal in question. I've pointed out that it's possible that in certain circumstances the fines or the costs could mount up, and I do think that the surest way of collecting them is attaching them to a property title as unpaid taxes. And unless there's some other legislation that prohibits that, I think we should have that within the bylaw. I think that has the additional benefit of making landlords aware of what goes on their property, and I truly think that is a benefit. My biggest one is the moving target about maintaining the status quo, when in fact we give the peace officer the discretion on whether or not to take control of an animal. As I pointed out, and again, I've got copies of this stuff, I'm more than willing to share it, but the Criminal Code of Canada, I think, would be contravened if in fact you left it up to the individual citizen to turn the animal loose. You're putting that citizen at risk of contravening the criminal code. For sure, you're putting that citizen at risk of contravening the Animal Protection Act. I truly think that that's the whole intent of, not that the whole intent, but it's a significant portion of this body of work, is what do we do with problem animals in the community? And to leave it discretionary, I really don't think does anybody a service. I do think that administration should be tasked with coming back to council with some alternatives and what those costs might be on how this could actually work. I don't think we've seen that yet. And to conclude with some comments on my discussion with a representative of the province of Alberta, Agriculture and Irrigation Branch. Very nice person, very nice, helpful lady. And it was her conclusion, after talking to her peers within agriculture and environment, that they consider the control of free-roaming animals to be a municipal responsibility. She understood and expressed to me her understanding of my concerns that in fact the Animal Protection Act doesn't really give the municipality the wheels to do that. And but she did say that it was a municipal problem and that both departments indicated rather clearly that in fact there was nothing on their radar that would cause them to look at the problem because they believe it's rightfully allocated to the municipality. We as a municipality control other animals, and rightfully so. We have to, for the protection of our environment, our ecological system within our urban community. And I don't think any other free-roaming animals, regardless of how many legs they walk on or what color their fur is, should be treated any differently. We have to look after our ecology first and foremost, and I think we have a history of doing that. I just think we need to be consistent. So I would urge my fellow councillors to pass this back. I get it that it's a bit of a nuisance, and given the misunderstandings that happened the first time this came before council, there is quite likely some concern that we will look bad. I will stress there's nobody here, including myself, looking to do anything inhumane, but what we are trying to do is deal with a very real world problem in a humane way. So I'll leave it at that and see what my fellow councillors have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're only dealing with the referral motion at this point in time. Councillor Nguyen, were you on for the referral or previous?
I'll speak to the referral motion. It's not up in East Drive, so this is
Yeah,
what we're
That's the motion.
if I may, Your Worship, based on the discussion so far on this item and the specific sections that Councillor Kelly drew attention to, I cited the sections, and of course with referrals, a timeline is needed, so I propose the end of Q1 of 2025.
I think I'm happy with the proposed motion. Is the administration comfortable with the timeline?
Ms. Smith?
So, Your Worship, I'm seeing heads nod, so yes, that should be manageable.
Okay, Councillor Nguyen?
Yeah, okay, so just speaking to the referral motion, then I'm in complete agreement with licensing, going ahead and changing the structure of that's extremely good idea. I do hear the concerns that Councillor Kelly has, given that the infrequency that we'd see this pet ownership bylaw, and also one small amendment that I was going to propose to it, which obviously we're not going to deal with today through amending motions. So I would be in support of this being referred back to the administration with a small change that I'm going to suggest here shortly. And I guess, should I suggest that change now as part of this referral motion, because there's no specifics?
You can suggest it and ask Councillor Kelly if it would be a friendly.
Okay, friendly to yours. So the only amendment that I was going to propose, and with the intent that this eases the job of your department when it goes to issuing fines for noise complaints when it comes to animals, and also I guess beef up the documents, the support documents that you'd have if that ticket gets appealed and goes to court, is that section 7.2 under noise include witness of both complainant and animal owner to be evaluated, with both being issued barking dog logs prior to a violation ticket being issued. And I'm amenable to hearing feedback on if that does indeed aid the process.
So we would add just 7.2 and they can take the information as stated.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kaiser, is that? And Councillor Kelly adding 7.2 as a friendly?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So we'll just add 7.2 in there. Okay. Councillor Macon on discussion and debate of the referral.
I'm actually a little bit confused about process here, and I'm not sure if I'm going to support the referral for this reason. We're referring this back and by not discussing each individual comment, I feel like we're agreeing that we want them to bring back those changes. And although I might agree with some of them, I certainly don't agree with all of them. So I don't understand why this is all in one blanket referral motion, and for this information to go and come back to us when it hasn't been agreed upon. So I'm struggling with this one. I would on the license fees, I'd be happy to make the motion after to ask administration to bring back an amending of the current bylaw, because I do think that should be in place prior to the end of the year. So we should deal with that as well. But I'm struggling on the procedure of this. I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Kaiser?
Oh, sure. Through your worship to Councillor Macon. I suppose I understand your perspective. I hoped to address that kind of concern with the phrasing of the motion, being that administration is just going to take the feedback from Councillor Kelly and Councillor Nguyen for further review with specific consideration to, and then said sections. So it's not necessarily direction to incorporate a specific amendment, just that further analysis of those sections be conducted. with, I suppose, options for consideration.
Yes, you still, oh, you took your mic
took
off,
it.
sorry.
I guess my only concern with that is that we don't have council saying that that's what we want. We're asking administration to come back and change it based on one person's opinion, not a majority. So every one of these would get changed based on that's the part I think. But I'll see how other councillors feel if they weigh in.
So, Your Worship, what we could do is take it away, go through these 5 items, determine which ones we would recommend council incorporate into the bylaw, if any. If we weren't supportive of one of the 5, we would provide reasons why it wasn't incorporated into the final bylaw, and then also provide council with the option to incorporate it into the bylaw if council saw fit.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Blizzard.
I will not support this referral, mainly because I think we should pass this and then bring it back for the changes afterwards. So we can approve the document the way it is now. We never are. That's never the end of a document. We can still ask to have it brought back for some of these changes, and then we can look at them one by one, because I agree there could be some minor changes, maybe not all 5, but I think overall the document is a good solid document. So I won't support this referral.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abatoye on the referral.
Honestly, I'm legit still very confused by what we're doing. So I thought I heard you, Ms. Jiggood. I thought what you had said was that we should approve it right now because we have a time crunch. So why do we have a referral motion in front of us?
Through your worship, there are a couple options before council. There is a bit of a time crunch with the licensing requirement. The licenses that are in place today expire at the end of the year. So we are getting ready to send out notifications, getting people to renew those licenses. Council has 2 options. They could approve the bylaw that's in front of them and then direct administration to bring back changes if they see fit. That would really come down to whether the members of council can live with what's in front of them or not. The other option is to refer this item to administration so that the changes are made before this bylaw is accepted. If council still wanted to waive the licensing requirement starting in 2025, there is a motion that could be put forward so that those changes are made in time for the next renewal season.
Thank you. So I agree with some of the changes that have been recommended by Councillor Kelly, but I also think that we need to approve this bylaw right now, and then we can deal with the changes after the fact, especially because of the time crunch that has been mentioned. I would not support the motion to refer. I believe that we should approve the bylaw as is, and then we can deal with these changes because I can live with the things that have been recommended by administration right now, but I do agree that there's further conversations that should be had, but I wouldn't support the referral.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris.
I also do not support the referral. I'm satisfied with the context of the bylaw that has been presented, and I really have an extreme displeasure with wordsmithing reports and documents and bylaws that come to council and trying to make changes on the fly. I'm happy with the bylaw as it is. If we need to make subsequent changes, if we do pass the bylaw today, which given the fact we need unanimous consent, if Councillor Kelly is not satisfied, I suspect he may not support unanimous consent, which would kill the thing anyways. But I don't support the referral. I think we need to move forward. Let's make a decision. We can always make changes to the bylaw to achieve the things that we each individually feel are important in relation to this particular subject. But I don't support the referral.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go to Councillor Kelly so you can close. Final comments on the referral.
The intent here is to get some options in front of us. I believe the exceptions or issues that I have noted to council are valid and of significant concern. You're right, Councillor Harris. I'm not going to approve unanimous if this doesn't pass. It's just not possible. I am not in favor, as a councillor, of voting for a bylaw that I have significant concerns with. When I vote to pass it, it needs to be satisfactory to me. Everybody. But my vote means it meets my satisfaction. I expect you all to do the same. And when we get to that point, we vote. This in no way meets my satisfaction. To vote on this today because we're in a time crunch, I think does serious harm to our system, to our credibility. We are here to enact bylaws that make sense and that are workable and that achieve an end. There's a reason to have the bylaw, and if the bylaw doesn't achieve anything or doesn't achieve it properly, we ought not to be voting for it. It can't be any simpler than that in my mind. So I'm ready to call a question, Mayor Katcher. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The motion is now closed for the referral only. Please cast your vote. And it is defeated 2-5, so we'll go back to the main motion for first reading. Is there any further discussion and debate on first reading? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Nguyen, your question.
So the last option I think that Janelle had mentioned was that we take out the licensing of this bylaw so that there can be further discussion and a subsequent bylaw be made solely for the licensing, and that could come back before at the end of November or December. Is that was one of the options?
So if this bylaw does not pass, you could put forward a motion to amend the existing bylaw.
Okay.
If this bylaw does pass, that's no longer necessary.
Okay, and then just process, Mr. Kaiser. If it gets first and second reading, fails consensus, it would come back on November 26th for third, correct?
To your worship, that's correct. It would be added to a future meeting agenda, so end of November 26th.
What is your point of order? Oh, he hasn't pressed it. What is your point of order?
Is it required that it come back to the next council meeting, or could in fact we wait for administration to bring back some suggestions on the concerns that have been raised today so that we don't have to go through this process and beat it up one more time? We actually have some options when we vote for third reading.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, I don't believe it's a requirement that it comes back the next council meeting, but it usually does because bylaws simply request 3 separate and distinct readings unless unanimous consent is given. So if it doesn't get unanimous consent, it would just make sense to bring it forward to the next meeting.
I'm anxious to pass this too. I will raise the same concerns over and over again until we address them by vote. So let's leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's okay, I lost. We're still on the main motion for first reading, and you're finished with close. Sorry, I apologize. I just had a moment there. Okay, so for first reading, please cast your vote. And that is carried 5-2. You can continue with second reading. Go ahead.
I make a motion that council gives second reading to responsible pet ownership bylaw C11-24.
Thank you. Do you have anything further to speak to this?
No.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion and debate? Not seeing anything? Anything on close?
No.
You're good. Motion is closed for second reading. Please cast your vote. And that is carried 5-2. You may present it for unanimous consent.
I make a motion that council give unanimous consent to proceed with third reading to responsible pet ownership bylaw C11-24.
Thank you. I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. And although it's carried, it needs unanimous consent. So therefore, it will come back at a future council meeting for council to give third reading. Thank you. All right. So are there any notice of motions?
No, we don't need it because this is going to be passed.
Okay, not seeing any. Any points of interest? Go ahead, Councillor Harris.
Your Worship, I'd be interested in receiving a brief report from administration regarding an update on the work that the contractors are doing to install fiber optic cables to older areas of the city of Fort Saskatchewan. It appears that the contractor has made significant progress in relation to a really good construction season in 2024. And so they've probably gotten to more places than typically they might have planned when they started construction. In other words, they're not in a freeze cycle yet. So I'd be curious to see which areas they've actually completed and whether they've actually turned those areas on, if they've been energized as an actual fiber optic service opportunity through ISP service providers, and what they're currently working on, when they expect to be finished those current areas, and the next set of areas that they will be getting to most likely in 2025 and when they expect to be finished. So basically an update as to how they've been doing and how they're going to be doing.
Okay, so that would be under councillor inquiries, but that's just...
Isn't that where it is?
We're still on points of interest, but that's okay. All right. Councillor Kelly, points of interest or inquiry?
Inquiries.
Okay. Go ahead.
Councillor Harris is finished?
Yep.
Okay. Yes. When will the extension to Southridge Boulevard be open? It seems to me this question was asked by Councillor Harris some time ago. My recollection is that the explanation was that we're waiting for lights. But it is a three-way intersection. It's not going to be that busy. One stop sign, the one that we currently have, would meet all the requirements. So why don't we get it open, and why are we waiting for lights?
Through your worship, absolutely, we can provide that update. I had the planners ready to go for that question, but I see they've left the room, so we can make sure to give council an update.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I will take a motion to go in camera. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, I'll move that council enter in camera to discuss matters under FOIP.
Thank you. I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. That is carried unanimous. Thank you. We will go to in camera.